Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the very first edition of the Young Farmers Late Show. We're very excited to have you connected. We will be live for 1 hour from here in Brussels. My name is Sebastian, and I have the immense pleasure of hosting this event together with Anna.
We've got a hot topic tonight, climate change in farming. It's so hot that even the cows are asking for more fens in the barn. You could say that the situation is so dry that even our jokes might need some watering tonight. But anyway, why a Young Farmers Late Show?
Exactly. Why? Well, in the so-called EU bubble, we talk a lot about agriculture. It's a critical topic, of course. It's also one of the main competencies of the European Union. But the EU happens to be criticized, sometimes rightfully, for not being always connected to the realities on the ground. So with this late show, we want to bring more EU to your farms. And for those of you in Brussels, we want to bring more farming to the EU.
But we are not alone tonight. We have invited some guests. They all work on the topic, but it's sometimes from the field, the lab, or the European Commission. You are also a very important guest because the show is interactive. So don't hesitate to send some questions to our guests directly in the chat. Let's get started. Before we start, we thought you might like to get some agri-news. A lot has been going on across the European Union in the past weeks. You might have heard about the strategic dialogue on the future of agriculture announced by the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. Can you tell us more about it, Sebastian?
Yes, absolutely. So every year the President of the European Commission addresses the European Parliament. It's the so-called State of the Union speech. The aim is to give an overview of the state of affairs and the political direction of the Commission. And this year, agriculture was a core topic. We need more dialogue and less polarization, said Mrs. von der Leyen, and launching a new initiative, a strategic dialogue on the future of agriculture. So it sounds like a good idea with a staggering 1/3 of European farmers that are now over the age of 65. You might be forgiven for imagining tractors equipped with built-in rocking chairs. The question is how to organize this dialogue, with whom, and above all, how will young farmers be listened to? They are the embodiment of this future of agriculture.
And that's not all about the future of agriculture in the EU, right?
No. Good news in the European Parliament. A report on generational renewal was just passed last week. Easy to agree on the type of challenge with all political groups behind the report. It's a great one where you'll find that young farmers have difficult access to land, access to credit, and the fact that they need more skills than a Swiss Army knife. Because seriously, would we all be able to be agronomist, marketer, HR specialist, trader, communicator, animal psychiatric, seed sorcerer, rain dance choreographer, ship stylist, mule motivator, hail bale Tetris gamer, farm to fork translator, all of those combined? Well, on the latter, maybe that's why we messed up and have from farm, barn, field to fork, plates, or even the dining table, depending on the language. Now, let's see what's next. Let's see how we consider young farmers in the European Parliament's race, right?
Yes, because the European Parliament elections are just around the corner. 8 months to go, and agriculture is already the main course for certain political parties. But what is on the table concretely? What will happen to the European Green Deal? And what are the visions on the future of the CAP? Those questions will definitely be at the center of the debate. Later tonight, we will have the chance to talk with Peter Medendorp, president of CEJA, about the priorities of young farmers in this process.
On another note, the revision of the protection status of wolves in the EU. It also kept the Parliament busy.
Yes, for the President of the European Commission too, the wolves have lost their grandma clause. Just a few weeks back, on September 4th, Ursula von der Leyen revealed plans to revise the protection status of the wolf. And let me tell you, it sure got the European Parliament buzzing with discussion. For many farmers, it's not monsters under the bed that keep them up at night. It's the thought of wolves in the barn that has been causing quite a stir. In Sweden and Germany, steps have already been taken towards more leniency in wolf conservation rules. The status of wolves is currently ruled under the Habitat Directive, which has not undergone any revision in the past 30 years. Now, the Commission has set quite an ambitious goal of delivering results on this issue by the end of the year. But with their calendar already bursting at the seams, it's left many of us wondering, how do they plan to fit it all in?
Talking about tight calendar constraints, no framework initiative for an EU sustainable food system anymore, or better known as this abbreviation FSFS, right?
No, FSFS.
Anyway, so what is this? Because people in Brussels like acronyms. So it's a proposal that the Commission was planning. The objective was to, with this FSFS, to define what is a sustainable food system. But so many years, brains and efforts later, with public consultations, etc., it might be cancelled. The end of the mandate is too soon, and priority will now be given to finalization of dossiers that are already on the table.
Yes, this is all the news we had for you tonight. Of course, this is not all that happened, so don't hesitate to keep yourself informed through other media outlets. Tonight's edition is on climate change. So let's first see some pictures. You can move them. Now you see what I'm speaking about. Those pictures were sent to us by our members, and they show the urgency of certain situations around the EU: droughts, floods, squalls, fires. Young farmers are in the forefront in this battle against climate change. They must adapt their practices and face uncertainty.
Indeed, and to tackle this topic, we are very honored to welcome our very first guest. I am pleased to introduce you to Mr. Wolfgang Burtscher, Director General of DG Agriculture and Rural Development from the European Commission. Good evening, Mr. Burtscher.
Good evening.
Thank you very much for coming. And just before we start, how does it feel to be the very first guest of the very first edition of the Young Farmers Late Show?
Thank you very much for inviting me to this Young Farmers Late Show, and I'm really honored. I think I'm pleased to be here because I'm convinced that young farmers matter. They matter for our future food security, they matter for the livelihood of our rural areas, they matter for our beautiful landscapes. So I'm really interested to support young farmers, to have an exchange with young farmers, and to listen to young farmers.
Thank you very much. Before we start diving into the topic, and because this late show is also about showing young farmers and farms, we wanted to ask you, how, where, and when was your last farm visit?
Thank you very much. Maybe I should tell you that I am from a mountain area in Austria, Klostertal, little village, and both my neighbors, who are at the same time my cousins, do have a dairy farm. And when I am there in summer holidays, I do not miss a moment to talk and discuss with them. But also professionally, if you want, I'm visiting farms. I've recently been on a Swedish farm, young farmers, very impressive in terms of innovation, innovative spirit, risk-taking, I must also admit. So this was impressive, but I'm also looking at other parts of the world. I'm just returning from a mission to New Zealand, where I have had experience with the New Zealander farmers, and this was also quite a very telling story. I've learned a lot.
Thank you for that, and I hope you will like the farm visits we have tonight. So to our audience, don't forget to prepare your questions, because later you will get to have them maybe answered. And now I propose you that we see a video from Anna Maria Mantovani, Italian young farmer.
Hello, my name is Anna Maria Mantovani. I'm 27 years old. I'm an Italian farmer, and my farm cultivates cereals. We are specialized in durum wheat, soft wheat, corn, oil rapeseed, sugar beet, and barley. Our farm is a farm about the first generation, and in the last year I graduated the university. I'm specialized in precision farming solution. So in my farm I applied these technologies for improve our yield and for being more sustainable. Today I'm in the farm shed, so you can find the harvester and the other machine. And this is the place where we have all our tractors and tools for our works. I think this is my favorite place of the farm because it is where we get inspiration for our work, and at the same time is the place where all the new ideas come from. So it's a very inspirational place for me. Last year, due to the drought situation, we decided to add another cultivation, that was tulips. So next spring we are going to plant again tulips. Thanks to this cultivation we can open the door of our farm to get involved all the people. Agriculture is the primary sector, and because we cultivate food for all the people. But now we have a big problem due to the climate change, and we have a lot of solution, but for win this challenge we need more and more innovative tools by politicians. I mean, for example, the new genomic techniques, where for example Italy was the first promoter in Europe that considered this is a good solution. Another solution that we adopt in our fields for mitigate the climate change are the cover crops. So thanks the cover crop, the field are covered by vegetation all along all the year, and this operation reduces the erosion soil by meteorological events. I think that our sector is one of the more resilient sector all over the world. I think also that young farmers are the more resilient people, because when we decided to do anything in our farm, we look all the time forecast.
Well, I think that in each farm, in each European farm, there is this own pet. So this is my pets. He is Ricky and he is Paulino. A funny fact is that wherever I go with my tractor in my fields, they always follow me. So they are farmers too.
We just saw in the video a completely flooded field. What does this trigger in you?
Indeed, I think if you see these pictures of natural disasters that have occurred in Europe now, be it in Portugal, in Spain, in Thessalia, in Emilia-Romagna, it's first the human suffering of those who have lost even their relatives, and the emotional suffering seeing that the work that you have done is lost. But next to this is also huge economic impact, because farmers are losing their harvest, but they're also losing their production potential for the future. And so there is also, apart from all the emotional suffering, there is huge economic consequences. And I think in terms of policy making, we have to ensure that farmers are equipped, better equipped in the future to face these natural disasters, which become, I wouldn't say regular, but certainly more often. And I think what we do in the European Union is certainly a good and first start, because you know that our support system, the direct payments, are continued to be paid to farmers who have lost their harvest, their production potential, because it's force majeure, and direct payments can continue to be paid, which is already a kind of safety net. Then I think many member states have opted in their national strategic plans to use a measure that is called reconstitution of the agricultural potential. So all those farmers who have lost their machinery, their land is destructed, have lost their trees, can, thanks to this support, buy new production means. Then, and sometimes this is not sufficient because it does not cover the damage that has occurred in terms of income, we have increasing demands to also use the agricultural reserve. But this agricultural reserve by year is 450 million euros, and you will understand it's not sufficient for 9 million farmers to address all the crises. So I think if we are faced increasingly with natural disasters, we have really to look that also our insurance systems and the uptake of insurance systems and of risk management tools in the member states, but also by the farmers, are really used. And to that extent, sometimes it's disappointing if we see in the national strategic plans that not all member states use the new risk management tools.
How do we make sure that they provide it in the member states? The fact that we lack this at the national level.
No, I think it's not about condemning anybody in this respect, but I think services, administrations, politicians will realize more and more that natural disasters will not go away. This will be not one-off events, but they will occur more regularly. And against that background, I'm sure that thinking about building up risk management tools will automatically become a reality in many member states.
And when we have those tools that are implemented, sometimes the problem is also the farmers that don't have necessarily the knowledge that it exists, or they don't go for it. How do we make it more visible? How do we push also farmers to really take into account this measure and implement it? Because it's anticipation from their side.
No, I think you are right, but also I think at the farmer level, this mind building will take place, that they realize that they are permanently exposed to natural disasters. And I think that will also direct them towards contracting insurances. But still, you are right, this requires advice services, support from public-private service providers who help farmers to get acknowledged with these tools.
Yeah, that's perhaps a skill that we forgot, navigating also what exists in terms of support.
But it shows. I found your entry point. What a farmer should do today, really incredible. Because good, not incredible bad, incredible good. Because I was just in New Zealand, and the first thing I saw on this farm was the farmer showed me his methane emissions, the certification, methane emissions, nitroxide, nitrates. Everything is measured. And I asked him, what has your grandfather who settled down here in 1856, what did he look at? And he was just looking at providing food. You are looking at the harm that you're doing to environment. And that has so hugely changed, but it also shows how challenging the job of a farmer and of a young farmer is in order to cope with all these expectations.
Speaking about this, actually, we have another question from Anna Maria that we just saw the farm of. I propose that we look at together.
We are asked to do more and more measures and action to fight climate change. How the European Union is supporting young farmers' profitability and avoiding unfair competition with the third countries?
Thank you very much for this question. I've already talked about the direct payments, and direct payments are often just seen as an income support. But I think we should not forget that direct payments also have an element already to contribute to biodiversity, climate aspects and environment through the good agricultural and environmental conditions. But this is, if you want, not really remunerating the farmer. The remuneration tools which we have now for the transition in terms of climate, biodiversity and environment are the eco schemes and the agri-environmental measures, where farmers who do more than is required by law get a compensation for the additional costs or for the loss of income that is related to these activities that are going beyond the legal requirements. And we do already a lot in terms of spending. Remember, we have about, between 2023 and 2027, we have about 300 billion euros for the agriculture budget, together with the national co-financing, out of which 100 billion is exclusively dedicated to eco-schemes and agri-environmental measures, but also investment measures, because as the young farmer has just indicated, it also organizing transformation also requires huge investments, new machinery, precision farming. All this digitalization of farm requires huge investments, and I think these are the tools which we provide in terms of funding. I think, and that's my last word, we really need to become better then to measure the success of these measures, which we are paying in terms of biodiversity, in terms of climate change, and in terms of environment. Because those who do not believe in the success of our policy, they permanently ask us, show us the progress. It is not enough to say, very likely, they want to have figures and facts.
Show us the progress, but also how it's related to what's happening outside of the EU.
So that was, sorry, I have missed this point, yes, exactly, because I think it's a key question now that our farmers are required to comply to high standards in terms of environment, biodiversity. And there is a concern that, that imported products do not meet these standards, in fact. And I think we need to take these arguments serious, but we also want to be sure that this is not in contradiction to the rules governing free trade. Because don't forget, Europe is a huge net winner when it comes to agricultural trade. So we do not want to end up in a trade war. And I think what is clear is that imports of products that do not meet the health, in particular health standards of Europe, they can be excluded. I think it is more difficult when it's about the production methods, which do not necessarily have an impact on the quality of the product, but which are relating to the way how things have been produced. And I think that will be the area to which we have to look more carefully. I think if you look at the report that the Commission has done last year on this issue, the so-called mirroring, we have showed some possibilities to do this very careful monitoring of import, for example, for purposes of animal welfare. Because I think that is an area, if you just consider the poultry sector, where different standards are very current and which really matter in terms of competitiveness.
It's by case with the production.
Yeah.
Okay, I propose that we head to another question from the field. Let's listen to Thomas, young dairy farmer in Ireland and specialized in the questions of agriculture and climate.
My name is Thomas Duffy, a dairy farmer here in Northeast Ireland. My question for the Commission is, given the proposals around carbon farming and carbon credits, how will we ensure access for the young farmers to continue to access land if there are competition from other sectors hoping to offset industrial emissions?
I think this is a very pertinent question, and more generally, what we are facing is really a competition about real estate and agricultural land for multi-purpose use. We should produce on agricultural land food. We should produce feed, we should ensure biodiversity, we should ensure energy. It's a little bit similar like the farmers. Land has to, and now we should do carbon storage. So I think we are really in a situation where we have to carefully look into what the different purposes and uses of agricultural land have as implications. And I note very carefully, and I've noted it already in the past when I have discussed with CEJA and young farmers, the difficulty, one of the key difficulties for the young generation of farmers, which is access to land and the price of land, and not only in terms of buying land, but also in terms of renting land. I see that in certain member states, they are very carefully looking at who should buy agricultural land. There are mechanisms in place which are still in compliance with the rules, but give priority to farmers when it's about acquiring agricultural land. Now, on the more specific question that the Irish young farmer has raised, I am aware of these concerns when it comes to carbon sequestration in agricultural soil. But it's also true that this is a huge opportunity for farmers. Firstly, it's a huge opportunity for all of us because it's about sequestration of greenhouse gas emissions, which lowers the stress which we might have on emitting less in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. Not only for agriculture, because I think people forget that agriculture plays a huge role in making available sequestration of greenhouse gas emissions, even for other sectors than agriculture. Exactly. So that there is a general, I think, in the public interest of favoring greenhouse gas emission sequestration on soil. And then you are also very well aware there are opportunities for farmers in terms of additional income if they deliver practices that are ensuring carbon sequestration. Also, I admit the details of how we do this are now subject to discussion at the Council and then in implementing rules. So I take this concern very serious, but I think we have also to look at the opportunities and the public good that carbon sequestration delivers.
Last thing, perhaps, before we move to the questions from you in the audience, farming is also about, we saw it also with the skills, about innovation. So we have a last question from Anna Maria on innovation.
When we will be able to use the new NGTIS crops to better adapt to climate change?
Thank you very much. I think you know that this is a very hotly debated and controversial topic in our societies. And I've been working 10 years as a Deputy Director General in Research and Innovation close to this topic. Then remember, we had a discussion when we have adopted the Farm to Fork strategy, where the question was, if you reduce pesticides by 50%, if you reduce leakages of fertilizer by 25%, if you do more organic farming, this will have consequences on yields. But we said, don't mind, research and innovation will help us to produce the same amount of food in a more sustainable way. We need research and innovation. We need research and innovation in all its appearances. Precision farming, eco systems and so on. But we should not exclude new breeding techniques as one of the solutions which will hopefully help us to square the circle between food security and sustainability. And I think this was what the European Commission has now tried with its proposal. I think it is a very prudent proposal that also takes into account almost the polarization which is about this topic. And I think what the European Commission has proposed is, and I'm just a lawyer, so excuse me for my layman's expression, but if I understand what the European Commission has now proposed is that breeding techniques and results of such breeding techniques that can also occur in nature should be subject to easier approval and acceptance in terms of breeding techniques, but those practices that are more complex in terms of intervention in genomes would be still governed by the existing legislation on GMOs. So it is about making available practices to farmers that permit a more focused, a more speedy use of certain breeding techniques, exactly to ensure, hopefully, that our agriculture production can be made in a more sustainable manner. But I repeat myself, it is one of the tools amongst many which we should use. We have integrated pest management, you know, all these other things which we should not exclude. We should not put everything in one basket. So I think this is what I would like to reply on this.
So you said hopefully also because now we look at what will happen with the legislative process.
Exactly. So on the legislative process, maybe just you have seen that now the Environmental Committee has adopted its opinion. I have participated in meetings with member states where I have the impression that many member states are favorable to this proposal.
I now propose you that we move on to the questions of our audience. We actually have a question from Christina that is asking us, what message do you send to the young people hesitating to farm right now? That's a difficult question to answer, but...
And we have 1 minute for this big question.
No, I think when it's about considering one's professional future, there are always economic considerations. At least for parents who have children, they are concerned about what their children are doing. This is fair enough. But I think it's also about emotions and about what one feels he likes to do. And my message to young people is, I'm really convinced that the continent in which we are living, the European Union, its member states, they own a lot to farmers in terms of food production. I repeat myself, in terms of beautifulness of landscapes, in terms of regions, villages, in all these respects. And I think agriculture is more than food production, it's really more. And my plaidoyer is to many others, be careful to qualify agriculture always under the negative aspects. There are so many farmers, young farmers, old farmers, who take their business serious, who try to do their best and try to work in compliance with nature. As our president has said, and I think it was quoted in your news from Brussels, that agriculture production and nature need to go hand in hand.
So I think the young farmers that are live with us would agree also with this, because we have many young farmers online. We're running out of time, unfortunately. We could talk about many more things, but it's time for me to thank you again for coming to the first edition of The Late Show. And before we move to the second session, we'll have a break with a video on one of the projects that CEJA is working on. It's mental health for young farmers, because it's also related to climate change. So we'll have this video. Thank you again for coming, and we can see the video now.
Farming is an amazing and exciting way of life. It is a vocation more than a profession. However, farming life is also the source of stress and anxiety due to a very demanding workload, isolation, financial uncertainty, and the effects of climate change. These are but some of the contributory stress factors that significantly impact on the physical and mental well-being of farmers. Experts report that farmers are more likely to suffer from psychological and mental distress than the general population. However, mental health continues to be a taboo topic in our society, and particularly within the farming community. Our core message is that we need to keep an eye on ourselves, on our families, our business partners, and our enterprising communities. We are delighted to introduce you to FarmRes. FarmRes, Farmers' Assistance Resources for Mental Resilience, is an Erasmus Plus project coordinated by the European Council of Young Farmers, CEJA, with 6 partners from 5 different EU countries and will be available until September 2024. We aim to raise farmers' awareness of mental health matters and to provide guidance to achieve an improved sense of the importance of minding their mental health in their daily lives. How? Through reports about European young farmers' social and labour situation and its relation with mental health, 16 farmers' success stories in preventing and overcoming mental health problems, and a farmer's mental health and well-being training toolkit. This training toolkit aims to bring all the outputs together in one platform, helping farmers to achieve well-being and bringing the results closer to mental health experts, developing prevention tools, detection tools, first aid tools. Our mission within the FarmRes project is to reduce stigma around mental health matters. It is relevant and timely that we all play our part in this journey. Cultivate your mental health.
We are back for our second session, A Pinch of Science. You're still with the Young Farmers Late Show. This time around we have 3 guests. We have Justine Pop, young farmer from Flanders. We have Hortense Viard, young forest owner from France. And we have Gabrielle Moinet from Wageningen University and Research. Very warm welcome to you all.
So welcome everyone. I first wanted to start with you, Justine and Hortense. You are a young forester from France and you are a young dairy farmer from Flanders. Could you let us know how does climate change affect your activities? Maybe we start with Justine.
Yeah, well, Belgium is a country with very mild climate, and the last decade, my father always said, the last 10 years, it changed a lot. The weather is always too much. It's or too dry, or too hot, or too wet. And that's a huge problem for us because we need feed from our crops to feed our cows. And I always tell people that a farmer only has one chance to harvest. And if that one chance fails, he don't have enough food to feed their animals for a whole year. So that is the main problem we see right now. A lot of colleagues don't have much food anymore for their animals, so they have to buy it very expensive from other farms. The second problem is our dairy cows. They are very sensitive to heat stress. So when there are heat waves like 40 degrees, they can have digestive problems, fertility problems like abortions, clot problems, mastitis, etc., etc. And that really makes me nervous, not only the cow health, but also the crop yield that drops down, because I think this is only the start of those many problems, and that makes me as young farmer very nervous at this moment.
Thank you for sharing this, Justine. What about you, Hortense? Do you recognize something from what Justine just mentioned?
Yes, for foresters or forest owners, uncertainty was always part of the deal because forestry is not 100% sure science, and we harvest trees our grandfather grew, right? Like oaks, it's 150 years. So if you don't harvest once, I mean, it's the next generation, even my grandchild won't be, you know? So that's one part of the thing. And so our problem is today, how do we project ourselves, thinking which tree species will resist in 70 years to extreme weathers, for example? we always have to take into account much more criteria than before that was already kind of betting on the future, right? So that's one thing. And I think the other important part is we've seen the pictures. I mean, fires, it's a bit impressive, droughts all around Europe, important diebacks in some forests. And society is kind of affected as well because we all have a kind of passionate relation with forest, and us now we have to come out from the woods where we never communicated so much and explain what we do with simple words, which is not always easy for foresters, I think, but no simplification of the debate on forestry. That's kind of the tricky one.
Indeed, the debate is quite complex, and that's why we also wanted this pinch of science. That's why we have you, Gabrielle. Could you let us know more about your research and what you learned about the contribution of agriculture to climate action?
And you also brought an object.
Yeah, you asked me to bring an object. That's a compass. I'll explain in a minute. But yeah, sure. So I'm a soil scientist. So I study soils, and there are good reasons for that. Soils are very important. You probably know that. They're a bit like the foundation of ecosystems. It's like your house. If you don't have good foundations, your house will collapse eventually. If you don't have good soils, ecosystems collapse. And soils are being degraded. Many soils around the world and in Europe are degraded. And a lot of that can be attributed to modern intensive agriculture. That's the type of agriculture that did a lot for us, producing a lot of food for a growing population, and there's a lot to thank agriculture for that. But it also creates environmental damage, a very high price that includes soil degradation, but also, amongst other, a very strong contribution to climate change. So when soils get degraded, they lose carbon, and that's where the idea comes from of carbon farming, the idea that we can rebuild carbon in soils to revert the degradation trend and at the same time offset anthropogenic emissions of greenhouse gases. We capture CO2 from the atmosphere, the CO2 that causes the warming, and just lock it away in soils. And that's pretty much what my research is about. I'm trying to understand how climate change and farming practices influence that carbon in the soil. And I've learned one important thing in the last 10 years, during which I've been thinking about that, is that using soils to mitigate climate change is probably a bad idea. It's largely ineffective and very risky. And there are many reasons for that. I'll mention two of the most important ones. The first one is that there's a limit globally to how much CO2 can be captured by soils. And there is a bit of an argument about the exact quantity, but everyone agrees that yes, there's a limit. So an average number is around 200 gigatons of CO2. 200 gigatons of CO2 is the equivalent of 4.5 years of global emissions at the current rate. So that means that in 5 years, human activities will have emitted more CO2 than what the whole addition of the whole soils in the world can do to mitigate climate change. 5 years, that's all we can buy with farming, and I just think it's too much asking. So the second reason why it's a bad idea to try to mitigate climate change with soils is related to carbon credits. I think it's just not up to the game for now. Carbon credits have been around for a while, and I think the main thing they've achieved is to just allow big emitters and large corporates to keep emitting and buying offsets instead of curbing emissions. And this is very concerning because indeed, we're just very far from being on track to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees. We're probably not even on track for 2 degrees. 2 degrees is just a couple of decades away, maybe 3 or 4. Most of you young farmers will still be in business then. And so you've said it's either too hot or too dry or too wet, and there are fires. It's really hard to cope with the situation as it is now. Well, under 2 degrees, what science tells us is that it's getting much worse. So it's a bit scary, really, and I really think we should now focus on adapting to climate change rather than trying to mitigate climate change. And adaptation is very difficult. It requires many different solutions, and Wolfgang said it, we don't expect farmers to just produce food now. We expect farmers to do all sorts of things to solve our environmental problem and everything. It's almost asking the impossible. But I don't think farmers are in this together, right? We're here to help, and I think it's a societal issue that we all need to work on. So I have a bit of a message for you young farmers, particularly for you, Justine. I think, yeah, so I've said that farming has caused a lot of environmental damage in the past. It still does, but I don't think we should hold particularly young farmers responsible for that. You're not. But you do have a choice now, and you're responsible for the choice you make, right? You can accept the situation, the dramatic situation in which we are, and just get on with it. Accept that we need a radical redesign of farming. Accept that small tweaks are not enough. Focusing just on carbon is not enough. Technology is not enough. We really need to rethink the way we farm. And just get help from people that are willing to help. I'm available. I think Wolfgang is available. He seems to be very willing to help as well. And if you're already doing that, it's great. Hang in there. I know times are rough, but the tide will turn in your favor because it has to. And alternatively, you can just keep listening to those selling easy technological solutions without really questioning the way you do things. That's your choice. So the compass is here because those are very difficult decisions. Knowing what to do is very difficult because the world has become so complex. We receive so much information, like the volume is crazy, and so many contrasting opinions out there, so it's really hard to find direction. So you always should have a boussole on you, sorry, a compass. Lost in translation here. My compass is to always be critical. Whatever the information, you have to be critical about it, and I really advise farmers to do the same. Particularly when you receive advice on how to farm, you should wonder, does that person want to help, or are they trying to sell me something? Do they have a conflict of interest? And if they do, you should be extra critical because, yeah, I mean, that's true. There's so much greenwashing, so many lies. So I guess really try hard not to fall for those because there won't be enough. Yeah.
So do you agree with the metaphor, with the compass, Hortense?
Yes. Which direction is leading the compass in forest is a bit difficult. Yes. South. I mean, south is now north, no, for us and tree species. But I agree with don't expect too much of the people managing some ecosystems such as forests or farms, because we will not be able to provide either a big carbon sink plus wood plus water purification plus recreation for people in some areas and so on. So yes, balance it more because we can't do anything, everything.
We have a testimony before we continue the discussion. Let's look at this testimony.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Matteo Pagliarani, and I'm a farmer from Italy. Since this summer, I became vice president of CEJA. I live in the middle of Italy, in the Apennines. This brings it's difficult because the condition of the soil, for the climate change, for the weather, for wild animal, for high cost of logistics, and in particular for the continuous floods and droughts in the last year, and in this area also the snow in the winter. My farm is a cooperative family farm, and we grow and cultivate 220 hectares in different crops, like wheat for making flour, or grass in our land for feeding our animals. We are specialized in goat cheese production and local red wine. We have also a farmhouse, and since the beginnings, we produce in only organic production. I really believe the water collection and management, also the forest, is the first rule we need to take. And we work with public administration for management of the territory, using, for example, innovative technology against attack insect and also for diseases. For the climate change, the first rule, because we work with the nature, we work with the weather, risk management is a very important topic we need to increase. We have a lot of challenges for the future in the next year to invest in public research for improving our farm sector, our resilience in countryside community, to protect the being of the environment, because the farmer are the keeper of the land, improving in particular our land, our soil health, for increasing the production of our soil. We know only one thing. We know how is important this work, not only for us, not only for production, but in particular to all society and for all the environment.
Just before we continue, just a reminder, please don't hesitate to send us the questions you want to ask to our guest. So Matteo explained about what he's doing on his farm. We saw some elements that what he's doing. We have a question actually from the audience that I would like to take already. This is for Justine. That is, being a dairy farmer yourself, have you already had to make adjustments to your farm due to climate change?
Yeah, well, the first adjustment was to put in the summers where there were a lot of heat waves above 40 degrees, to put a water sprinkler on the roof. So it would be in stable like 3 degrees cooler than outside. And the cows won't suffer as so much. And the second adjustment comes from the agro service, so the salesmen who come, we buy seed from them, and they have a new crop breed, and the crop breed has a specific certificate. It calls Hydra Neo, and when the crop does about photosynthesis, the water loss is much less. So
already a lot to do. And
yeah.
You touched upon, Gabriel, you touched upon the carbon farming, carbon credits, and so on. So we have a question from Matteo about this. So let's listen to Matteo with this question.
I would ask one question for our guest. We talk a lot about carbon farming, but how much certainty can we have that the efforts we make can actually be measurable and therefore rewarded?
And before your answer, perhaps I would also like, before that, the answer from Hortense, because you're also like an expert on carbon certification, carbon credits. So what's your answer to Matteo?
Well, yes, dealing with nature projects, you always have to deal with uncertainty, right? And we cannot predict everything. But therefore, we already have some experience, actually, from years of carbon certification. In France now, we implement some. It's more than 1,000 foresters under this scheme. And it's working for now. I don't know about the future, but still we made some progress. Some things we learned based the schemes on management, measure actions, reward actions that we can follow up, but do not always impose results, because you cannot expect high results, predictable results from uncertain models. We're all modeling, right, about forestry, about farming, and so on. So base the measures on management, right? Reward management. And second one, we can mutualize risk as well, inspiring us from insurance systems through buffers, for example, a lot used in carbon certification. And that has been working, most of it, if you assess correctly the risk at the beginning, and you can always increase buffers if you need, or upper the scenario you started from, but do it dynamically. Like do not put big obligations on a very long future to producers that do not always know.
Then it works
forecast
on the side of the forester as well, or the farmer. The question is also, do you disagree somehow with what Gabriel said, like how it works with the certification? Do you see it as a can be a success story as well.
I mean, it can also be rewarding if you reward actions and you keep the positive on it. And we need funding. We need to find new ways as well. And forestry is part of the solution to mitigate climate part. So the opinion I have is forest owners could be rewarded for the action they take on carbon, but other services as well, water, biodiversity, and so on, with no obligation of results. Yeah.
And Gabriel, do you want to react?
Yeah, actually, I think I tend to agree with most of that. But I do think that I'm not expert in certification standards, right? But I think it's a bit less uncertain even for forests than below ground in the soils, which you don't see, right? And to answer directly Matteo's question, I wouldn't have much hope that your effort will be measured and rewarded, maybe, depending on how we do it. But I mean, measuring carbon is very difficult and time-consuming and expensive, so it's not really an option. Models are very uncertain, so they will give you predictions, but whether this is actually happening or not, you'll never know. And there are promises about what we call remote sensing, so you use satellite imaging or drones and you can relate that to change it in soil carbon, but I'm not an expert here again, but I'm very skeptical, mainly because the most enthusiastic people I find are from the private sector, and they're very reluctant to share their data. So it tells you something, again, be critical here. But I think it's besides the point. Anyway, I can give you an example, maybe. I've just done some research on soil carbon under agroforestry systems. In northern France, including on my dad's and brother's dairy farm, actually. So they planted apple trees there, and 5 kilometers away there's another farm that also planted apple trees in a grassland. The farms are identical, same species of trees, same species of cows, same management, same climate, same soil type, same everything. In one case, planting trees increases soil carbon, in the other case it decreases soil carbon. But besides that, they provide all the same services, right? An extra cash crop, apples for the farmers when years are rough. We've measured that. Actually, they improve infiltration of water in the soil, so probably decrease erosion and the risk of flooding and these kind of things. I haven't measured it, but maybe they improve insect diversity. They provide shade for the cows in the winter. But if we follow the carbon credit route, one farmer gets rewarded and the other doesn't. So how fair that system can be? I think Wolfgang said it earlier. We should focus also on rewarding the multiple services we're asking from farming, the diversity, the water infiltration and purification, etc. Just not only carbon, but of course, you can implement your farm to provide all the services. If someone wants to give you money for it, I'd say just take it, because but just don't follow that money, because it's not getting us anywhere, I reckon.
Thank you, Gabriel, for your answer. Actually, I would head to another question that was asked from the audience, actually to Hortense. So Julie is asking you, do you have any concrete examples of carbon projects actually realized?
Yes, and that's my job in France. We realized more than 1,000 carbon projects for forest owners through our French scheme of certification. It only certifies actually sequestration, no soils, because we know it's too uncertain to be measured in forestry. So only the gain from maybe from afforestation to forestry. This you can have an idea, but otherwise we don't measure soils. So that's a good point. We have good examples, mostly restoration of degraded forests after hazards. And it has been proven a win-win system then, because you need funding. It can be really appealing for the forest owners, but there you should be cautious of the rules of the game, liability, what is expected from you. So yes, criticize maybe who is giving the advice if they try to sell you service, or be on your side to negotiate the term of the rules, I think. But it's working.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And before we finalize our segment, we have another question for you, Justine and Hortense. What advice would you give to young farmers who hesitate to start their profession because of all the challenges we've mentioned? And maybe we start with Hortense.
network. Join CEJA or your home networks in young agricultures. Us young foresters, we network in France through Forest Fair. You learn a lot. You share your uncertainties and so on about climate change, but we share, and we know forest is part of the solution, and actually it's kind of an exciting challenge to reflect on it and build the solutions together. So.
And what about you, Justine?
Well, I share the same opinion as you. As Belgian farmer, I can learn a lot from Mateo from Spain. He has a lot of dry periods, and how can I learn from him to make that work too in Belgium? That's a great deal. But on the other side, maybe I am also very nervous about the climate change, and I don't know what is going to happen in the future, and I don't know if it's all going to be okay. But one thing I'm very aware of, that climate change is not like any other crisis. You know, you have the Corona crisis, you have like the World War. Those were all crises who had an end. They had an end point. I think like climate crisis don't have an end point, and that's really to be aware of, that we now have to make sure in this transition as young farmers that we can share the knowledge together and place like the basements for a lot of generations to come. And if we don't, it's the future doesn't look so bright. So that's we need the energy from that opinion. Yep.
Thank you very much for everything you told us tonight and for coming to our late show. We are now coming to the last part of today's show. So let's go. So as promised earlier tonight, we are now with Peter Medendorp, President of CEJA. And so I would say first, welcome, Peter. You've been elected President of CEJA 5 months ago. How has the start of this mandate been going?
Yeah, first of all, thank you very much for having me. And now back to the question. It's good to know that being the president of CEJA, it's not just a one-man show, it's really a team effort. And I'm very happy to be able to tell that I have a very great team of fellow board members who are also young farmers. In addition, we have a great secretariat at CEJA, very professional and well-informed. And moreover, a very ambitious and exciting membership. So taking this all in consideration, my job is just chairing our 10 yearly working groups, managing the process, and of course making sure that the CEJA message is well heard at European institutions. So the CEJA machine is well on steam, I can say.
But it's still a lot to do. So today's discussion was on climate change. We heard a lot with all of the sessions. What's your take on what was said, and would you like to add something that was perhaps missing?
Well, in general, the CEJA membership is very forward-looking, as we are the farmers who still need to be farming in 30 to 40 years. So we take climate change very seriously. And something I do like to stress, and it was also mentioned a bit before, is that young farmers do need adequate tools, adequate education, adequate skills to tackle the challenges coming from climate change. Moreover, if you look at the risk distribution currently from climate change, there is too much still on young farmers' shoulders. There should be a better risk distribution among the entire value chain.
And speaking about risks and challenges, what will be the priorities of CEJA's board in the upcoming 2 years?
Yes, so together with the rest of the board, we concluded on our priorities this summer. And it was voted in our September working group by the membership. And we really wanted to hit the core of young farmers' problems and challenges. So the title of our priorities is therefore also The Road Forward, young farmers taking the lead, focusing on task forces on nature and biodiversity and water management, opportunities and challenges concerning these two issues. We're working on a political statement on food system, trying to also see what possible solutions can be for the situation of young farmers in the food system. And of course the European elections and the next common agricultural policy after 2027.
So big program. And the elections, we also mentioned it at the beginning, they are around the corner. So what's, as CEJA, as young farmers, what do you expect from the next MEPs that will come into office?
Yes, the elections next year. Well, I think this answer is twofold. First of all, we expect from the new generation of MEPs to be talking to the new generation of farmers when it comes to agricultural files. And secondly, I think it's very important that the next MEPs, the members of the European Parliament, will help us, young farmers, create the future of agriculture, to create policy that is really aimed at farmers who are here to stay, who are still farming at 30 years, who are still farming at 40 years. I think that is essential for the coming mandate. Thank you very much.
And do you think we're on the right track then in the discussion to prepare the election race?
When it comes to the election race, things that tend to happen is that more and more polarization starts to happen because parties want to distinguish themselves from other. We think that it's most essential that the elections and the new parties and the new MEPs do take into consideration the young farmers' needs, and that's most certainly not an acceleration of the polarization process.
Well, thank you very much, Peter, for coming, and we'll follow, of course, all of these topics. You can follow all these topics. Now it's time for us to thank you all for joining us remotely to this very first edition of the Young Farmers Late Show.
We are looking forward to seeing you again in April for the second edition of our Late Show. We will talk about skills, so it definitely promises interesting debates. I would say you now see you soon again.
Goodbye.
Come what may, you see, the gain for me is you.